Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The expanded BRICS bloc has launched a bold counteroffensive against new American tariffs, marking a pivotal moment in global trade. This coalition, representing over half the world's population, challenges U.S. economic dominance, signaling a shift towards a multipolar world. The BRICS nations, including China, Brazil, and India, are imposing retaliatory duties on American goods, reshaping the global financial landscape. This isn't just about trade, it's a struggle for influence and sovereignty, affecting consumers and businesses worldwide. The stakes are high, with potential price hikes and supply chain disruptions. The BRICS bloc aims to create a more equitable global order, challenging the post-war economic consensus. Whether this leads to multilateral negotiation or economic fragmentation remains uncertain. The global economic landscape is changing, with long-lasting aftershocks. The tariff showdown is the result of decades of shifting economic power, a story that stretches across continents and generations. The world's economic landscape has been shaped by a series of pivotal moments, each one building on the last, leading us to this critical juncture. Nowhere is this more evident than in the ongoing rivalry between the US and China, two economic giants whose interests and ambitions have increasingly collided on the global stage. Historically, American tariffs have served as powerful tools of protectionism and foreign policy, shaping not only domestic industries but also the nation's relationships with the rest of the world. The BRICS group, originally Brazil, Russia, India, and China, later expanded to include South Africa and other emerging economies, forming a coalition that directly challenges U.S. economic dominance and the established order. Their goal is clear: to reduce dependence on the U.S. dollar, which has long been the backbone of international trade and finance, and to create a more balanced global system. They also seek to reform Western-controlled financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank, institutions that have historically favored the interests of developed nations. The seeds of conflict were sown in past US-China trade disputes, many of which remained unresolved for years, only to be reignited by the aggressive tariff policies introduced during the Trump administration. The BRICS vision of a multipolar world, where power is shared among many nations, stands in stark contrast to the US strategy of using tariffs as a primary negotiating tool to maintain its influence. For BRICS countries, American tariffs are seen as a direct threat to their economic development, fueling their determination to push for a reformed and more equitable global economic system. Meanwhile, the U.S. justifies its actions by citing national security concerns and the need for economic fairness, arguing that these measures are necessary to protect American jobs and industries. The U.S. aims to correct what it sees as persistent trade imbalances that have disadvantaged its economy for decades. This fundamental disagreement over the rules and direction of global trade has set the stage for today's dramatic confrontation, with ripple effects felt in markets and economies worldwide. The global economic system now stands at a crossroads, as nations are increasingly forced to choose sides in this escalating struggle for influence and prosperity. The outcome of this confrontation will not only determine the future of international trade and cooperation, but also shape the balance of power for generations to come. In 2025, the U.S. launched a relentless campaign of tariffs, reviving the Trump doctrine on trade. By April, potential tariffs of up to 50% were announced, with a temporary 10% tariff in place. The message: negotiate on U.S. terms or face economic pain. July saw additional tariffs targeting BRICS, isolating the coalition. Key commodities like copper faced staggering tariffs, disrupting global markets. The U.S. projected a massive increase in tariff revenue, aiming to realign global trade. Targeted duties protected American industries, forcing foreign companies to build U.S. plants. Deals with allies mitigated impacts, but the stance towards BRICS remained confrontational. The semiconductor policy demanded a 1-to-1 ratio of domestic production to imports, challenging global chipmakers. For Trump, tariffs are a tool of statecraft, wielded with maximum force. In response to a wave of U.S. protectionism and escalating tariffs, the BRICS nations convened a critical summit in Rio de Janeiro in July 2025, signaling a pivotal moment in global economic relations. The world watched as leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa gathered, determined to chart a new course. The resulting Rio Declaration marked their unified defiance, explicitly condemning U.S. tariffs as threats to global stability and prosperity. It was a bold statement, one that resonated far beyond the summit walls. Brazil's President Lula da Silva captured the mood, declaring, "The world has changed. We don't want an emperor. a phrase that encapsulated the frustration and resolve of the BRICS bloc. The declaration laid the groundwork for sweeping countermeasures, including accelerating de-dollarization, boosting intra-BRICS trade, and striving for greater financial independence from Western institutions. BRICS leaders also proposed ambitious reforms to the IMF and called for changes in global currency valuation, directly challenging the long-standing dominance of the US dollar and Western-led financial systems. Ironically, the US tariff campaign intended to isolate rivals, instead united the BRICS nations, forging them into a more cohesive and determined coalition than ever before. The Rio Declaration became a line in the sand, transforming what had been a simmering trade skirmish into a full-blown economic confrontation with global consequences. Many Western analysts had doubted BRICS' ability to act in concert, but their unity at Rio was a significant geopolitical development, proving skeptics wrong and sending shockwaves through financial markets. The coalition's strategy shifted from mere defense to actively reshaping the global financial landscape, with new initiatives and partnerships emerging from the summit. The US actions intended to protect its own interests had instead galvanized its biggest economic rivals into a determined and coordinated coalition. The Rio Declaration was their collective response, marking the beginning of a new and more confrontational phase in the ongoing trade conflict. The BRICS bloc showed no intention of retreating, making it clear they would challenge US economic policies and assert their own vision for the future. The summit was a turning point, with BRICS leaders openly committing to building an alternative economic order that could rival the West's influence. The confrontation with the US was about more than just trade. It was a struggle for global influence, economic sovereignty, and the right to shape the rules of the international system. The BRICS nations emerged from Rio more determined than ever to reshape the global economic landscape, setting the stage for a new era of competition and cooperation on the world stage. The trade war's impact is felt in boardrooms and trading floors worldwide, as decision-makers grapple with new uncertainties and shifting regulations. Every sector, from manufacturing to technology, is being forced to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. The automotive industry was hit first, with US tariffs on heavy trucks affecting manufacturers like Daimler. These tariffs have led to increased costs, production delays, and a re-evaluation of global supply chains for automakers. Globalized production lines now face financial risks at every border crossing, as customs checks and new duties slow down the movement of goods and add layers of complexity to logistics. The pharmaceutical sector is in disarray, with tariffs threatening drug supplies and market stability. Shortages of key ingredients and finished medicines are becoming more common, raising concerns for patients and healthcare providers alike. Some experts argue the impact may be negligible as companies already invest in US facilities. However, others warn that these investments may not be enough to offset the broader disruptions caused by the trade war. Tariffs have caused dramatic price spikes in commodity markets like copper. These fluctuations ripple through industries, affecting everything from electronics to construction. US manufacturers scramble to secure supplies, raising input costs and reducing competitiveness. Many are forced to pass these costs on to consumers or cut back on production. The technology sector, especially semiconductors, faces strategic challenges. Companies must navigate export controls, intellectual property concerns, and the race to innovate faster than ever before. The US demands a 1-to-1 ratio of domestic chip production to imports, disrupting global supply chains. This policy shift is forcing companies to reconsider where and how they manufacture critical components. The reliance on China for rare earth minerals remains a vulnerability for the West. These minerals are essential for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles, making supply security a top priority. Shifting supply chains away from China is difficult, leaving industries exposed to countermeasures. Companies are exploring alternative suppliers, but the transition is costly and time-consuming. The trade war forces industries to rethink manufacturing and procurement strategies. Long-term planning now includes risk assessments for tariffs, political tensions, and supply chain resilience. The global economy faces uncertainty, with industries adapting to new realities. Flexibility and innovation are becoming essential for survival in this volatile environment. The trade war's impact is profound, affecting industries and economies worldwide. As the situation evolves, businesses must remain agile, ready to respond to new challenges and opportunities on the global stage. The trade war's human cost is felt by families and workers worldwide. Rising tariffs translate into higher consumer prices, eroding purchasing power. Workers in trade-reliant industries face job insecurity as companies struggle with increased costs. The agricultural sector, like soybean farmers, suffers from lost markets due to tariffs. Uncertainty disrupts lives, making future planning difficult for businesses and individuals. The trade war injects radical uncertainty into the global economy, affecting livelihoods. The promise of globalization is replaced by rising barriers and shrinking opportunities. The US BRICS trade conflict reshapes global alliances, creating economic blocs. The US pursues bilateral deals, rewarding allies and punishing others. Nations face strategic choices: align with the US or risk exclusion. BRICS presents an alternative, promoting trade in local currencies and resisting US pressure. The global standoff creates new swing states, caught between competing powers. The geopolitical landscape becomes binary, forcing difficult calculations. The fracturing global order risks instability and conflict. Experts urge caution, highlighting the end of predictable, rules-based trade. Trump's tariffs are seen as a permanent feature, not a temporary tactic. The long-term effectiveness of tariffs is questioned, with potential self-inflicted wounds. Tariffs designed to protect industries may raise costs and hinder competitiveness. Some sectors, like pharmaceuticals, may see less dramatic impacts due to prior investments. Decoupling from China's economy is a major challenge, with deep mutual dependencies. The trade war creates a complex web of economic interdependence. The future of global trade remains uncertain, with significant strategic challenges. The global economy is at a crossroads, with US tariffs and BRICS retaliation shattering trade consensus. This is a clash of ideologies: national interest versus a multipolar world. The result is a fractured, contentious marketplace with rising business risks. The US and BRICS have escalated confrontation, challenging US economic leadership. The ripple effects include volatile markets, disrupted industries, and geopolitical tensions. The human cost is real, with higher prices and job insecurity. The conflict erodes trust needed for global challenges like climate change. The future hinges on whether powers can negotiate a new trade framework. This moment calls for reflection on the true price of trade wars. The choices made now will shape the global future for generations.